some acknowledgements, first of all, to our amazing, incredible panelists. I don't want to say this because I cry, but I'm so looking forward. I also want to thank the Vincent Price Art Museum and to all the staff who work in this project. Steve Wong, the director of the museum. Steve, Gloria Ortega. Thank you, Gloria. There is some amazing to make sure that this event actually happens. And Dan Guerrero, who's on the board of the foundation of the museum. Dan actually was the genesis of this idea to connect both the film and the and the exhibit. And like I told him, I said, by the way, he's not here tonight. So I said, you might not be there in person, but you're not going to be forgotten. So we really owe a big applause to them for coming out to this event. Just to emphasize, thank you Gregorio and Mario for your mastery. This is a masterpiece, for the ages. So thank you for that. I want to start with an opening statement, just to create a context for our panel discussion. So thank you for being part of this meaningful discussion showcasing UNIDAD, Lesbian Latinos Unidos, along with, on the side of angels, Latina Lesbian Activism exhibit. We're thrilled to bring together these two powerful expressions of LGBTQ Latina art and history. This collaboration strengthens our community's connection to its cultural and activist roots. The UNIDAD takes us back to the early 1980s, a time when Latina, Latino, Latinx, Hispanic LGBTQ communities were building spaces of resistance and care in response to racism, homophobia, sexism, transphobia, classism, xenophobia, and the devastating impact of the HIV/AIDS pandemic on the humanitarian service aspect. That would be all this. So yes, we were still impacted by all of this. Blue, the first major gay and lesbian Latino organization in Los Angeles, emerged from both struggle and hope, leaving a legacy that still matters today. But history isn't just history. As the past, it is still very present. As we have seen in recent months during this and the previous Trump administration, attacks on immigrant communities, LGBTQ rights, people of color, women, and working class people echo many of the same challenges Blue confronted over 4 decades ago. This makes tonight's conversation urgent, not only to reflect on the past, but also to ask what lessons can we carry forward to live in the moment? What lessons can we carry forward to live in the moment? We're very fortunate to be joined by an incredible and dynamic Latina Lesbian Activism leaders who will help us reflect on these connections and intersections between then and now, between identity and activism, and between survival and joy and identity. So maybe we can start by introducing yourselves in the context of your role in Blue or Blue, because many of you are doing double duty, working in both, so maybe we can start with you.
Thanks everybody for being here and for that lovely, lovely applause. I've seen the film quite a few times by now, and I get emotional too. Especially I think that and seeing us all coming back together. I want to really thank Gregorio and Mario and Rolando, like Veronica said, for bringing us together. Some of us have not seen each other for 30 years. We were all interviewed separately before we were brought together for that in that final scene. And so it always strikes me how similar our recountings of our experiences were. even though we hadn't talked to each other about this, none of us spoke to each other before we were interviewed. Others of us remained in each other's lives for decades. But it's just, wow, that's not what you asked me, is it? So I was the first female president of Blue, the third president after I was Rolando's vice president, and that's the way we worked. So then I became president, and obviously helped create Lesbianos Unidos. I think that's the one.
So my name is Elena Pop, and I actually was not active in Blue. I became active when Blue was founded. But I was at, I think, the 1984 Blue dinner, and Dolores was supposed to be the speaker. And something happened, and she couldn't come. And they asked me to speak. So what I said was, I'm going to make this very, very short, because you can't promise the people Dolores Huerta and give them Elena Pop.
One of those lesbians that wanted to work with lesbians. And so I went to the Blue meetings, but my focus was the lesbians. For a number of reasons. And then I went to the first Blue retreat, like I was saying, and it was just so, for me, it was transformational. And so I wanted to do the next one, and I talked to Laura, I don't know if you remember, and I said, my God, I really want to, I'm part of it, I want to organize. She's like, we're too tired, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to have another one. This is a lot of work. And I said, no, I'll take it, I'll do it. So then it was like, other one jumps in, and then, but we opened it up more, right? We began to, and by this point, there was word of mouth about the lesbians being able to come together in the space, that it was just so incredible. So we opened it up and we started putting out information. And so we went from being 20, 25, 30 people to 80 something, and it was just like we had no space. So from that on, it continued to grow, and women became more involved. So a big part of the community that I really was able to begin to build at that point, it's because of Blue, and all of them, and this one over here, I kept running into her in demonstrations before we were in Blue, and we were in demonstrations at the Shell station. I ran into her one time. We were doing other stuff, and then all of a sudden she was like, there too. So that one,
my name is Rita Gonzales. I was both in Blue and Lou. I really love both of them, and I just had such a great time meeting so many people, and just looking at the memories, like Gracie, we were so young. Yeah, I was so young. You look good, girl. I was doing Radio Blue, and the radio show, and I had such a great time. And then Eduardo Archuleta, who did it for many years with me, and I hadn't seen him in years. And it's like we were so bonded together all the time. It took us like days to edit things, and we were just locked in this room. And then not to see him in a while. And because of this, we have revived Radio Blue. It's now Radio Cute Blue. And Mario's involved with it. We have revised Radio Cute Blue. It's on KPFK, but we also have a website, correct?
We have a website, Blue Archives, and it's on all the podcast platforms, Apple.
Well, there's a QR code out there, I believe. So somewhere out there, I don't know how to read those, but I'm old school. But it's been great because of that, and just getting to really connect with everyone again. It's been the memories. It's just so much. It's just and you were there. A lot of you were there. So yeah, that's all I can say.
Thank you. So this is for Laura and Elena. Both of you have been involved with on the side of NGOs, Latina Lesbian Activism, etc. Why do you think it's important to connect the exhibit and the platform?
Well, I want to acknowledge Vanessa Quintero, who is one of the curators of the exhibit from UCLA. Rita Flores, the head librarian at the UCLA Chicano Studies Research Center, She's also Chilean, by the way. And so this all came about because Elena and I are both featured in the exhibit because we donated our archives to UCLA, to the Chicano Studies Research Center. When you organize this laundry, you get boxes of shit. I have so much stuff. And I didn't want to obviously throw it all away, but I had a choice to make about, because there are also gay archives and queer archives, and including in LA, about where do I want my stuff to go? What story do I want to be a part of? You know, the gay rights movement or the Chicano Latino movement. And to me, it was much more important that we be visible in the history of Chicanos and Latinos in California and LA. And so that's where my papers are, and that's how the exhibit came about. I am thrilled. I mean, I hear it's like going up on the TikTok. And that the exhibit has been really popular.
Yeah.
That people have come, to see this very small, very powerful exhibit here at Boot Camp. And just like the reception the movie keeps getting, the reception the exhibit is getting, it just tells me that people want this information.
Yeah.
That it's still relevant today. And that, like I said, it's a story that needs to be told. I mean, the gay rights movement has been one of the most successful social and civil rights movements in this country. And guess what? It wasn't just white people. And so I'm really glad that story is being told and that people are interested in it. And so thank you for all that labor that you put into making that happen.
Both the movie and the exhibit are about preserving our history, and I think it's extremely important that we preserve our history. And for me, the exhibit is part of the solution to my pack rat tendencies. When I first, Yolanda Wetter for years, so those of you that didn't know Yolanda Wetter, Yolanda the T, Yolanda the Terrible, who was at the Chicano Studies Resource Center. And finally, in 2007, we decided it was time to purge the many storage facilities, the garage, and my office. And we took everything into a great big office in Lincoln Heights. It was more than 300 boxes, with 9 huge file cabinets. And Yolanda walked up and down and looked at it 3 times the way only Yolanda could. And at the end, she came up to me and said, Diosa, if you were, oh my God, help me. Gloria, no, Allred. Gloria Allred. We would want all this stuff, but you are, after all, only Elena Pop, and therefore we have to purge. And if only Yolanda could get away with telling something like that, I loved her for it and in spite of it. And so we purged. We spent like a month going through and deciding this flyer yes, this flyer no, until I think you took 300 boxes. I forget how many boxes you took. Many linear feet. It's on if you Google it, it says how many linear feet it is. And I'm thrilled that it is somewhere where it can be used. And they just told me that they just got a grant to actually sort it and process it so it'll be usable to people. So,
thank you. I really Yolanda.
One more more Yolanda story. She comes to my office at the Legal and Faith Foundation of Los Angeles, where my sign on the door said Elena Pop, staff attorney. She literally took a knife, carved out staff attorney, and wrote Yosa. Only Yolanda.
So maybe
She
a couple,
carried a knife.
on a good day, right? So maybe a couple of you can answer this. So when Latina Lesbian leaders joined here, something shifted. Something shifted in the organization. What do you think was qualitatively different that changed?
Well, I mean, I was one of the early women to join Blue. By the time I joined, it was already Lesbian Latinos Unidos. The name had changed within the first 6 months. And I was a lesbian separatist. I was very, very passionate about guarding our separate space as women. And I never wanted to not be with the men in Blue. I mean, for me, it sounds corny, but it was like family, right? It was the brothers I didn't have. It was the music and the food and the jokes and being a lesbian in that space with those people, because I wasn't like that in my family. You know, I couldn't be like that in my family. So I don't know. I have no idea. I've never felt that way again. I've never felt that the men actually wanted us there. In other organizations, it's like, yeah, we know we need to have men, and oh, we really want women, but we don't know how to do it. You know, in the 20th century, we need no hands. You know, or just like they say about people of color, we really want people of color, but we don't know how to do it because you don't really want us, right? Because if you wanted us, you would make us feel like you wanted us, and we were wanted and good. I guess that's how I felt.
Anybody else?
I love Blue because we were co-ed. And the men, God, they were like brothers. I could tell them anything. And if I was feeling sad and I just didn't want to see anybody, didn't care, they would come to my house. And they would just, just sit there and not ask questions. They were just there. Maybe we would watch a television program or something. And then it just made me feel that I was wanted, that someone really, really cared about me. They were my chosen family. And then when they started to pass away, that was my family dying. They were there one day, like I borrowed something from someone, and then the next week I said, well, where's Michael? I haven't seen him. When he died. I mean, what do you mean he died? I mean, I have his cassette. I still have his cassette. And yeah, it was hard. I loved being with the women too, in Lesbian Unidos, but that was separate. I mean, in some places, though some of the women did come to the Blue events, but I liked having that diversity. When I wanted to be with the men, I could be with the men and women, and then, or if I just wanted to be with the women, I could be with the women. And that was so beautiful about the whole thing. And that was my family too.
No, I think one thing, I don't know, because you said qualitatively in my head, I'm not researching like qualitatively. I don't know. I don't know how we did that. But I think one thing is we learn from each other. As human beings, we learn from each other. And I think behavior is a huge component of how we learn. And so by being around other women being around other women who were activists, who had passion about not only themselves and their lives, but about other people's lives, about their other women's lives, about their kids, about women who went through some really hard times because they were lesbians and they had children. A good friend of mine, Elena, actually, who lost her child because she was lesbian. They took her away, took the son away. There were so many other stories it's about learning or being able to step into that resilience. That was amazing. And I different for the men because it was different for all of us. And we talk about that separately. And I never felt like I had space with men, especially because especially when you're local, you have opinions, you have something to say, and you take your power. You're not welcome, either in white spaces or in men's spaces. It's difficult. And that's the reality. I'm not, I was never really a separatist, but I'm not, but you have to really own what that was. And I think that the learning for the men that were coming into blue and being around the men who were already in blue, such as you and Louis, David, those guys were amazing. And I think you served as an example to other men to behave. Behave like human beings. And that's what it is. Men just need to be human beings. And let go of this other stuff of superiority. And I think you guys did that to other men. Because they could not come into the space and try to take ownership of that. It was about shared space. That really was a big deal. So qualitatively, I don't know if it was so much, but I know that that was an impression for me and, observation.
Says the researcher.
The researcher.
So,
Can I just pick up one thing that Vero said? We all knew Nancy. We all knew Nancy Valverde. She was part of Lesbianas Unidos, and she passed away just a couple of years ago. When she talks about, I know people are shocked when they hear women could get arrested walking down the street wearing men's clothes. You had them on 3 items of women's clothes, and the police would count. Women used to lose their children for being lesbians. We did not, my daughter grew up around Lesbianas Unidos. I was a lesbian mother by choice. Most of the women in that time in the 80s, if they had children and were lesbians, it was from previous marriages. And they lost their children because they were considered unfit. It was just, there was no defense. You're a lesbian, you're unfit to raise children. So I just am saying all of this to, especially for the young people, who may take for granted the freedoms that you have now, the whatever, for us to do what we did then, it was really hard.
I'm brave.
I'm brave. Maybe we can start with Veronica. What can the new generations of queer Latin community leaders, what can they learn from you and you about organizing their communities given this environment?
I'm going to follow Laura. I think that, being brave. Being brave is a privilege. And I think that we have to step into our privilege. We did it before, and we need to do it again. And we need to do it again. And we need to do it again. Because that privilege, we all have it in some ways. The color of your skin, the coloration of your skin, I should say. Colorism. Depends on where you're in the spectrum of that colorism. You got privilege. Whether you're a man or a woman, you got privilege. If you're a little older, you may have a little privilege because people see you different. People see me differently in the streets. So, how do you step into that privilege? Right now, I'm a U.S. citizen now. That's a privilege. Not that necessarily it's in that wall, you're a citizen. But if you're walking in the streets and you can spot other people who are being abused, and it's deportation, step into it. But it's a privilege. And we don't all have that privilege. You may not be able to step into it because you gotta go home and take care of your parents. Because you gotta stay at home. Anything is about where we are. So I think that's what I would say. It's about in every moment that we need to show up for each other. If we don't do it for ourselves, nobody is doing it for us. And we're seeing that over and over again. And so right now, who's stepping in for us? El Taco, those people started out following. I mean, there's so many organizations that are just amazing, right? And just stepping in, and however we can. However we can. But I say that is where young people, the message is, step in, man, because nobody's doing it for you. I just read this morning, we were talking about this guy from Texas who drove to Texas to get a job as ICE because they're offering so much money and blah, 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 and him and his family. And the economy was, his father was deported just recently, right? His father was deported, but he wanted to take the job. And his family said, if you take that job, we're never going to speak to you again. He said to them, I can't find a job. I can't support my family. I can take that job because they'll pay me well and I'll just move them on. So there's a choice there. There's a choice. And so we need to make choices every day about all kinds of stuff. But showing up is one of those you can't stop making choices.
They are trying to erase our history. We cannot let that happen. And because of documentarians, they're preserving our history, and we need to support them, because that's what's happening right now. In the next 5-10 years, no one's going to know what happened, and we're going to be all ignorant. So it's very important to really fight for what we had, because what we had is where we are right now, and we cannot take that for granted. Because we thought, oh, they can't do this to us. They are doing it to us. So I want to be brief on that, and that's why we keep it like that.
I am the granddaughter of a revolutionary. My abuelo fought in the Mexican Revolution with Zapata and then with Villa. And one of the things that he taught me as a young child that it was my personal responsibility to right any wrong that crossed my path. And so if you are walking down the street and someone is being attacked, intervene. At least call 911. But if you have the strength, also intervene. And if you're seeing someone being deported, intervene. At least shout out and get their name and telephone number so that you can call, and the telephone number of someone that you can call. And I also believe that it is my personal responsibility to contribute more every day than I take. And if everybody did that, then the world would be such a different place. 90% of the population cares about themselves. 10% cares about the greater good. I'm an eviction defense attorney, and sometimes in our waiting room, when people start complaining about how weak the laws are, well, they're weak because you're not involved, number one. And then I will do a secret poll. If you were a landlord and you could make $500 more a month by kicking out your tenant, would you do it? And when I do it, when asked it verbally, nobody will do it, right? When you do it by secret, between 89 and 92% will admit that they would do the same thing to somebody else to make $500 a month more. That we need to change that. We're recruiting 10%ers. 10%ers not enough recruit, both in the LGBT community and in the do-gooder community. We need more do-gooders.
I do feel like because I come from a place of relative privilege, it's easy for me to say people should, do this and that, and I did not come from privilege, that's for sure. I didn't go to high school or, I was on welfare when I had my daughter, and, my circumstances have changed so that I do feel like I have a lot of privilege. But I have a lot of compassion for people who feel like they have very limited choices. who look around in their lives and don't see a different path because the system is failing. The system is failing people like us. The system doesn't give a shit about poor people. And so I try to have compassion, right, for people who feel like they don't have any power and that they don't make a difference. That is our job to change, right? Is to try to get people to feel like they do matter and that they do make a difference. But I don't write them off either. Yeah, it's been very perplexing, this whole Latinos for Trump. Everybody knows Snow the Product. She's a hot lesbian rapper. And she has this new song that is blowing up called Salvador. You gotta watch that. Calling out the Trumpers and her family in the Spanish rap. Yeah, I don't, it infuriates me, and I do know that a lot of people just don't see the choices that they have.
I'm giving it
But the one last thing is, aquí estamos y no nos vamos.
So I'm getting signs to wrap it up, but we're going to go for another 10 minutes. I think we also want to open it to the audience, so we have a chance to actually see exhibit. One of the most attacked communities from outside and even from inside our own communities, the transgender community. You are what we now consider either trans or non-binary members, but it was never part of the blue agenda. Did we miss anything? And if so, what do you think it was? Well, we, even though we had trans and non-binary members in blue, it was never really part of the blue agenda. It was very gay and lesbian, cisgender. And so what did we miss?
There wasn't a trans agenda 40 years ago, right? I mean, women were butch, men, there were a lot of men who loved to cross-dress but didn't consider themselves transgender. I think as there has been more freedom and sexual liberation for people to become more of their whole selves, to have a bigger range of experience. That has changed. It really wasn't, I don't know. We had really hard glitches in blue, and I know that younger people now are like, oh, which, that's so outdated. It is what it was, that's what it was.
Maybe one more.
I feel the same way. There was really no conversation. Like, one of my brothers at the time, now it's my sister, is trans. And, when I hear her story, it was like she waited for my parents to have. I don't know that there was that conversation. I mean, had there been that conversation, it would have been part of the agenda. I know that, given who we were and what we did.
Yeah.
So at the time, we weren't even accepting bisexual people into our organization. So let's get real about that. Lesbianas Unidos in 1991 or 92 had an actual discussion about whether we wanted to add bisexual women to the organization.
We did not.
And for the most part, the conversation was very low, except for Rita Gonzales and her best friend, Crystal Alama, made a motion to include bisexual women because they tend to be femme and there was a shortage of femmes. So it's not that we missed something, it's that it really wasn't there yet. And I think that if Lou would have come out on the right side of that dialogue.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you one last question. This is going to be a one-sentence answer. What everyday act of resistance, big or small, makes you feel proud to be part of the Latina Lesbian and Activist community? One sentence. I have the toughest job.
Being consistently out in straight spaces.
To at least one member, either of your family or someone close to you in your inner circle, about being queer, about being Latina, and about voting. And making them accountable. As my brother said back then.
Yeah.
Be comfortable of who you are. And don't let anyone take that away from you.
And the question was about active resistance.
Yeah, like, a smaller bit,
The way I dress is my active resistance.
We know it's critical to tell our stories, as whoever controls the narrative of the past controls the future. We also know that unfortunately our rights are not automatic or permanent, and that each generation must fight for them anew to maintain, and most importantly, to extend those rights. What we heard today shows us the intersected work of the Latina lesbian leadership, the resilience and that their solidarity is vital, especially when communities are under attack. The legacy of Lou and Lou teaches us that visibility, organizing, and caring for one another can truly shape history, and we have. So on that note, thank you so much to everyone for